Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Chapter 6, text 1. Shri Bhagavanucha Anashrita Karma Phalam Karyam Karma Karoti Yaha Sannyasi cha yogi cha nariragnairna chakriyaha.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, one who is unattached to the fruits of his work and who works as his obligated is in the renounced order of life, and he is true mystique, not he who fights no fire and performs no duty.
Yam sannyasi rahur yogam tam vidhi pandava nahya sannyasya sankalpo yogi bhavati kaschana.
What is called renunciation, you should know to be the same as yoga or linking oneself with the Supreme, O son of Pandu, for one who can never become a yogi unless he renounces and the desire for sense gratification.
Arurukshor yogam karma karanamuchyate yogarudhasya tasyeva shamah karanamuchyate.
For one who is a neophyte is sorry, for one who is in a neophyte is in eightfold yoga system. Work is said to be means, and for one who is already elevated in yoga, cessations is all material activities is said to be the means.
Yada hina indriyartheshu na karma svanushajyate sarva sankalpa sannyasi yogarudhastadochyate.
A person is said to be elevated in yoga when, having renounced all material desire, he neither acts for senses gratification nor engage in the fruitive activities.
Uddharevatatmanatmanam natmanam vasayadet atmaiva hyatmano buddhur atmaiva ripuratmanah.
One must deliver himself with the help of his mind and not degrade himself. The mind is a friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well.
Bandhuratmatmanastasya yo natmana chitaha anatmanastu shatrutve vartetatmaiva shatruvat.
For him who has conquered the mind is the best friend, but the one who has failed to do so, his mind will remain the greatest enemy.
Jitatmanah prashastansya paramatma samahitaha शीतोष्ण सुख दुःखेषु तथा मानापमानयोः.
For one who has conquered the mind, the super soul is already reached for he has attained tranquility. To such a man, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor are all the same.
ज्ञान विज्ञान तृप्तात्मा कूटस्थो विजितेन्द्रियः युक्त इत्युच्यते योगी समलोष्टाशमकाञ्चन.
A person is said to be established in self-realization and called a yogi or mystique when he is fully satisfied by the virtue of acquired knowledge and realization. Such a person is situated in the transcendence and is self-controlled. He is everything, whether it be pebble, stone, or gold, as the same.
तुह्यनुदासीनं नद्यास्त्वदेषु बन्धुनुषु साधुष्वपि च पापेषु समबुद्धिर्विशिष्यते.
A person is considered still further advanced when he regards honest well-wishers, affectionate benefactors, the neutral meditors, the envious, friends and enemies, the pious and the sinners, all with an equal mind.
योगी युचित्त सततम् आत्मानं रहसि स्थितः एकाकीयत चित्तात्मा निराशीरपरिग्रहः.
A transcendentalist should always engage his body, mind, and self in relationship
ગરમ પાણી કોથળી જોઈએ છે
with the
Huh?
Supreme. He should
કરેલી
live
છે
alone
એમાં
in a He should live alone in a
Huh?
secluded place and should always carefully control his mind. He should be free from desires and feeling of possessiveness. Sorry.
शुचौ देशो प्रतिष्ठाप्य स्थिरमासनमात्मनः नात्ययुच्छतं नातिनीचं चैलाचितमुक्षौतरम् तत्रैकाग्रं मनः कृत्वा यतचित्तेन्द्रियक्रियः उपविश्नसि च युज्याद् योगमात्मा विशुद्धये.
To practice yoga, one should go to a secluded place and should lay kusa grass on the ground and then cover it with deerskin and a soft cloth. The seat should be neither too high nor too low, should be situated in a sacred place. The yogi should then sit on it very firmly and practice yoga to purify the heart of controlling his mind, senses, and activities and fixing his mind on one point.
समकार्यशुग्रीवं धारयञ्चलं स्थिरम् सम्प्रेक्ष्य नासिकाग्रस्वं दिशशनमलोकयनम् प्रशान्तात्मा विगतभिर्ब्रह्मचारिदित्रे सतः मनः संयम्यमच्चित्तो युक्त आसीत् मत्परः.
One should hold one's body, neck, and head irritated in a straight line, straight steadily at the tip of the nose. Thus, with the unagitated, subdued mind, devoid of fear, completely free from sex life, one should meditate upon me within the heart and make me ultimate goal of life.
युञ्जन्नैव सदात्मानं योगी नियतमानसः शान्तिं निर्वाणपरमां मत्संस्थामधिगच्छति.
Thus, practicing constant control of the body, mind, and activities, the mystic transcendentalist, his mind regulated, attains to the kingdom of God or the abode of Krishna by cessations of material existence.
नात्यशन्तस्नु योगिस्ते न चैकान्तमश्नतः न चाति स्वप्नशीलस्य जाग्रतो नैव चार्जुन.
There is no possibility of one's becoming a yogi. O Arjuna, if one eats too much or eats too little, sleeps too much or does not sleep enough,
युक्ताहारस्य हारस्य युक्तचेष्टस्य कर्मसु युक्तस्वप्नावबोधस्य योगो भवति दुःखः.
he who is regulated in the habits of eating, sleeping, recreation, work can mitigate all material pains by practicing the yoga system.
यदा विनियतं चित्तम् आत्मन्येवावतिष्ठते निःस्पृहः सर्वकर्मेभ्यो युक्त इत्युच्यते तदा.
When the yogi, by practicing yoga, disciplines his mental activities and becoming situated in trance, devoid all material desire, is said to be well established in yoga.
यथा दीपो निवातस्थो नेङ्गते सोपमा स्पृहा योगिनो यतचित्तस्य युञ्जतो योगमात्मनः.
A lamp in a windless place does not waver, so does a transcendentalist whose mind is controlled remains always steady in his meditation on the transcendent self.
यत्रो परमते चित्तं निरुद्धं योगसेवया यतः चैदात्मनां ध्यानं पश्यन्तात्मनि दुष्यति सुखमात्यन्तिकं यद्दन् बुद्धिर्गार्हमति धियम् वेति यत्र न चैवायं स्थितश्चलिततत्त्वः यं लब्धा चापरं लाभं मन्यते नाधिकं ततः यस्मिन् स्थितो न दुःखेन गुरुणापि चाल्यते तं विद्या दुःखसंयोग वियोगं योगसमुचितः.
In the stage of perfection called transcendent or samadhi, one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities by practicing of yoga. This perfection is characterized by one's ability to see the self by the pure mind and to relish and rejoice in the self. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness, realized through transcendental senses. Established thus, one never departs from the truth, and upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain. Being situated in this position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of greatest difficulty. This indeed is actual freedom from all miseries arising the material contact.
अनिश्चयेन युक्तव्यो योगो निर्विण्णचेतसः सङ्कल्पप्रभवान् सत्या सर्वानशेतः मनसैवेन्द्रियग्रामं विनियम्य समन्ततः.
One should engage oneself in the practice of yoga with determination and faith and not to be deviated from the path. One should abandon without expectation all material desire born of mental speculation and thus control all the senses on all sides by the mind. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, welcome Mataji, Indra Mataji. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sorry for any mistakes I've made.
Not at all. Thank you so much. Krishna is saying that who are reciting his Bhagavad Gita, they are worshipping by the intelligence. So, and if at all there are any faults in worshipping Krishna, Krishna is all merciful. He is accepting the devotion behind the action. So, thank you again.
Thank you, Haribol.
Hare Krishna. So our verse for today is 22-23. There are 3 verses, almost 3.5 verses, and there's long purport. So we'll read it all through, and then we'll talk about this verse. So Bhagavad Gita 6:20-23. Yatro paramate chittam niruddham yoga sevaya yatra cha eva atmanam पश्यनात्मानि तुष्यति सुखम आत्यांतिकम यत्तद् बुद्धिग्राह्यमतीन्द्रियं वेत्ति यत्र न चैवायं स्थितश्चलति तत्त्वतः यं लब्ध्वा चापरं लाभं मन्यते नाधिकं ततः यस्मिन् स्थितो न दुःखेन गुरुणापि विचाल्यते तम विद्याद दुःख समयोग वियोगम योग समंजितम. Synonyms: yatra, in that state of affairs where, uparamate, sees because one feels transcendental happiness, chittam, mental activities, niruddham, being restrained from matter, yoga sevaya, the performance of yoga, yatra, in which, cha, also, eva, certainly, atmana, by the pure mind, atmanam, the self, pashyan, realizing the position of atmani, in the self, tushyati, one becomes satisfied, sukham, happiness, atyantikam, supreme, yat, which, tat, that, buddhi, by intelligence, grayam, accessible, atindriyam, transcendental, vetti, one knows, yatra, wherein, na, never, cha, also, ev, certainly, I am he, istitaha, situated, chalati, moves, tattataha, from the truth, yam, that which, labdva, by attainment, cha, also, aparam, any other, labham, gain, manyate, considers, na, never, adhikam, more, tata, than that, yasmin, in which, sthita, being situated, na, never, dukkhena, by miseries, guruna api, even though very difficult, vichalyate, becomes shaken, tham, that vidyat, you must know, dukkha samayog, of the miseries of material contact, viyogam, extermination, yoga, samjitam, called trance in yoga. Translation by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada, and the purport also by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. In the stage of perfection called trance or samadhi, one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities by practice of yoga. This perfection is characterized by one's ability to see the self by the pure mind and to relish and rejoice in the self. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness, realized through transcendental senses. Established thus, one never departs from the truth, and upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain. Being situated in such a position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of greatest difficulty. This need is actual freedom from all miseries arising from material contact. Purport. By practice of yoga, one becomes gradually detached from material concepts. This is the primary characteristics of the yoga principle. And after this, one becomes situated in trance or samadhi, which means that the yogi realizes the supersoul through transcendental mind and intelligence without any of the misgivings of identifying the self with the superself. Yoga practice is more or less based on the principles of the Patanjali system. Some unauthorized commentators try to identify the individual soul with the supersoul, and the monists think this to be liberation. But they do not understand the real purpose of the Patanjali system of yoga. There is an acceptance of transcendental pleasure in Patanjali system, but the monists do not accept this transcendental pleasure out of fear of geoparadising the theory of oneness. The duality of knowledge and knower is not accepted by the non-dualist. But in this verse, transcendental pleasure, realized through transcendental senses, is accepted. And this is corroborated by Patanjali Muni, the famous exponent of the yoga system. The great sage declares in his Yoga Sutra 4.33 Purushartha Shunyanam Gunanam Pratiparaswaha Kaivalyam Sarupa Pratishtha Vachiti Shaktir Iti. The Chitta Shakti or internal potency is transcendental. Purusharth means material religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and at the end, attempt to become one with the Supreme. This oneness with the Supreme is called Kaivalyam by the monist. But according to Patanjali, this Kaivalyam is an internal or transcendental potency by which the living entity becomes aware of his constitutional position. In the words of Lord Chaitanya, this state of affair is called Cheto Darpan Marjanam, or clearance of the impure mirror of the mind. This clearance is actually liberation or Bhav Mahadavagni Nirvapanam. The theory of nirvana, also preliminary, corresponds with this principle. In the Bhagavatam 2.10.6, this is called Sarupena Vyavasthitaha. The Bhagavad Gita also confirms the situation in this verse. After nirvana or material cessation, there is the manifestation of spiritual activities or devotional service to the Lord, known as Krishna consciousness. In the words of Bhagavatam, Sarupena Vyavasthita, this is the real life of the living entity. Maya, or illusion, is the condition of a spiritual life contaminated by material infection. Liberation from this material infection does not mean destruction of the original eternal position of the living entity. Patanjali also accepts this by his words Kaivalyam Sarup Pratishtha Va Chitta Shaktiriti. The Chitta Sakti or transcendental pleasure is real life. This is confirmed in Vedanta Sutra 1.1.12 as Anandamayo Abhyasat. This natural transcendental pleasure is the ultimate goal of yoga and is easily achieved by execution of devotional service or bhakti yoga. Bhakti Yoga will be vividly described in the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. In the yoga system, as described in this chapter, there are two kinds of samadhi called sampragnata samadhi and asampragnata samadhi. When one becomes situated in the transcendental position by various philosophical researches, he is said to have achieved sampragnata samadhi. In unsampragnata samadhi, there is no longer any connection with the mundane pleasure, for one is then transcendental to all sorts of happiness derived from the senses. When the yogi is once situated in that transcendental position, he is never shaken from it. Unless the yogi is able to reach this position, he is unsuccessful. Today's so called yoga practice, which involves various sense pleasures, is contradictory. A yogi indulging in sex and intoxication is a mockery. Even those yogis who are attracted by the siddhis or perfections in the process of yoga are not perfectly situated. If yogis are attracted by the byproducts of yoga, then they cannot attain the stage of perfection, as is stated in this verse. Persons, therefore, indulging in the make-show practice of gymnastic feats or siddhis should know that the aim of yoga is lost in that way. The best practice of yoga in this age of Krishna consciousness, which is not baffling. A Krishna conscious person is so happy in his occupation that he does not aspire after any other happiness. There are many impediments, especially in this age of hypocrisy, to practicing Hatha Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, and Jnana Yoga. But there is no such problem in executing Karma Yoga or Bhakti Yoga. As long as the material body exists, one has to meet the demands of the body, namely eating, sleeping, defending, and mating. But a person who is in pure bhakti yoga or Krishna consciousness does not arouse the senses while meeting the demands of the body. Rather, he accepts the bare necessities of life, making the best use of a bad bargain, and enjoys transcendental happiness in Krishna consciousness. He is callous towards incidental occurrences such as accidents, disease, scarcity, and even the death of a most dear relative. But is always alert to execute his duties in Krishna consciousness or Bhakti Yoga. Accidents never deviate him from his duty. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 2.14, Agamapaino nityas tam Bharata. He endures all such incidental occurrences because he knows that they come and go and do not affect his duties. In this way, he achieves the highest perfection in yoga practice. Very long purport and also slightly technical. We'll just do the Praniti prayers. Om Agyanam Timirandas Sagyananjana Shalakaya Chaksharan Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Gadamayam Dadati Sa Padantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitam Sta He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenbandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Shri Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhaivacha Patitanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So if we look at the translation, it looks quite big, but I'll just break it up into the way the verses are. So the very first verse, Yatta Paramate Chittam Niruddham Yoga Sevaya Yatra Chivatmanam Atmanam Pashyanatmani Tushyati. The word Tushyati means pleasing, which is very satisfying. One becomes satisfied. It says here Tushyati, one becomes satisfied. So this verse is here, it says, in the stage of perfection called trance or samadhi, one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities by practice of yoga. This perfection is characterized by one's ability to see the self by the pure mind and to relish and, and rejoice in the self. So, rejoicing in the self means Atmani Tushyati. So, one is rejoicing in the self. Pashyan Atmani Tushyati. That's what it means. Now, the next verse, Sukham Atyantikam Yat Tad Buddhi Grayam Atindriyam. The word Atindriyam is very significant here because Srila Prabhupada has taken this word, Atindriyam, and he has, on the strength of this verse, defied those who believe that merging into the Supreme is the goal of life. But this particular verse is showing that how Atindriyam means soul has is transcendental indriyas or transcendental senses, and through these transcendental senses soul is able to access the unlimited happiness of the spiritual world. So if I read the translation of this, Sukham Atyantikam Yattad Buddhi Grayam Atindriyam Vetti Yatra Na Chaivayam Sthitas Chalati Tattvataha. Tattvataha is the truth, and Sthita means situated. One gets to access to the happiness or Sukham through these Indriyas, which is Atindriyam, transcendental Indriyas, then one becomes situated in the truth. So let's read the translation. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness realized through transcendental senses. Now let's read the further part of it. Yam labdhva cha aparam labham manyate nadhikam tatah yasmin sthito na dukkhena gurunapi vichalyate. So labdhva cha aparam labham, which means that if we look at the translations here, labdhva means by attainment and labham means the gain. Now this verse is saying by attaining such gain, what happens? Yasmin sthiti na dukkhena, one is no more in misery. And so the meaning of this particular verse comes from here. Established thus, one never departs from the truth So this was the previous verse, and after this, the current verse. Upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain. He thinks that there is no other greater gain. Tam vidyat dukkha samayoga viyogam yoga samanjitam. In this, being situated in such position, one is never shaken in the midst of greatest difficulty. So that's also the part of this verse. Yam labdhva up to gurunapi vichalyate. So the meaning again, I'll read this. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness realized through transcendental senses. After that, established thus one never departs from the truth. So this is verse number 2. Now from here, upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain. Being situated in such a position, one is never shaken even in the midst of greatest difficulty. Then the last lines, tam vidya dukkha samayoga, viyogam yoga samanjitam. They're saying dukkha samayog and viyogam, which means all the miseries that arise from the material contact exterminates. And by this yoga, by this particular yoga samanjitam, it says here, this indeed is actual freedom from all the miseries arising from the material contact. So that's an understanding of these 3.5 verses and how Srila Prabhupada has put them here in this translation. Now, when we read through the purport, we can see that he has initially talked about a situation of samadhi, because there's a mention of the samadhi word in this particular section, and how one's mind is completely restrained from the material activities. So, but Srila Prabhupada explained that coming to a samadhi does not mean any kind of inactivity. And it definitely does not mean that one would go and merge into the transcendence. Rather, because there's a mention of transcendental pleasure to be experienced by transcendental senses, it is explained that the soul beyond this material senses has its own transcendental senses. And with those transcendental senses, one is able to achieve unlimited happiness by the internal potency of the Lord. Now we understand the internal potency of the Lord, or Haladani Shakti of the Lord, is Srimati Radharani, and creating situations for the Lord to experience unlimited happiness. So just Chitta Shakti or internal potency is transcendental. And with the help of this Chitta Shakti, it is mentioned that Patanjali, who gave the Yoga Sutras, he's saying that beyond the Purushartha, what are these Purushartha? Which is Dharma, Artha, Kam, and Moksha. Dharma is religion, Artha is economic development, Kam is sense gratification, and Moksha is becoming one with the Supreme in this context. They are called the Purushartha. Saying beyond this Purushartha, there is another situation where you achieve Kaivalyam. Now, Kaivalyam word is used generally to become one with the Lord. But here, in this particular statement, Srila Prabhupada is explaining that Kaivalyam is also meaning that it's an internal. But according to Patanjali, this Kaivalyam is an internal or transcendental potency. Why? Because he has mentioned Chitta Shakti. Vaya, it says here, Va Chitta Shaktiriti. He's explained what is this Kaivalyam. Oneness with the Lord is the oneness of the will of the Lord, not that you physically go and merge with the Lord. That is not what is recommended. Now, in this context, there was another very nice explanation that Srila Prabhupada has given. Let me locate this, where exactly it is. Otherwise, I'll come back to it. Yeah. So this was a wonderful conversation. Uh, Let me get to the root of it. It's Srimad Bhagavatam. It's a lecture on Srimad Bhagavatam, which was given in Montreal in 1968, July the 4th. In this particular Srila Prabhupada has given some explanation, and then he mentioned about the purification of the senses. And there's a guest who is asking Prabhupada, what do you mean by the purification of the senses? And Prabhupada is now explaining. Please hear it very carefully because it's in direct relationship to the verse that we are just reading. Srila Prabhupada says, yes, just like in a diseased condition of your eyes, you cannot see. In diseased condition of your hand, you cannot touch. In diseased condition of your leg, you cannot walk. All your senses in diseased condition cannot work. Similarly, in materially diseased condition, you cannot understand what is God. You have to cure yourself from this diseased condition. Then you will see, you will touch, you will perceive, you will know, you will feel everything. Those who are unable to cure the disease, they want to kill. Just like a patient is suffering in a very bad type of disease. The physician cannot kill, then cannot cure him. Then he thinks, let me die, let me commit suicide. So this is such a beautiful analogy, actually. I was just reading this and I was marveling the philosophical argumentative arguments that Srila Prabhupada can present and give these analogies to make the concept so simple. The person who is thinking that he cannot be cured is the person who is practicing yoga to merge in the Lord. Because he cannot cure his material disease, therefore, what does he decide? Let me die. Let me commit suicide. Prabhupada adds here. So this voidism or impersonalism is a symptom of frustration, not being able to cure the disease. But actually, living entity is eternal. Just like a rascal or foolish man thinks that I'm suffering so much, let me commit suicide. And it'll be a great relief. Because when one merges into Brahman Jyoti, he must be relieved from the material pleasures and pains. But that's not ultimate goal of life. So it's only that one has committed suicide. Rather, one could cure himself. And what is the disease? The disease is that of one is, let me just finish this statement first. It is foolishness. He will put into another further torture after his life. He'll become a ghost. So because they do not know that living creature is eternal, therefore they want to make the ultimate solution as void, zero. It can't be zero. It is not possible because you're eternal, therefore you have to cure. That curing process is Krishna consciousness. So now going back to the verse here, it is explained here it's Chitta Shakti. And now this Chitta Shakti is the place or is the potency of the Lord which gives unlimited pleasure, anand, to the transcendental senses of the soul. Now further down, Srila Prabhupada explained the liberation that one thinks that one would become one with the Lord is not the liberation that that our transcendentalist is looking for. Rather, Lord Chaitanya has explained the state of affairs is Cheto Darpan Marginam, or clearance of the impure mirror of the mind. Now, with regards to this, again, Srila Prabhupada has covered a point somewhere about Cheto Darpan Marginam, and he's explained that how Cheto Darpan Marginam would ultimately lead to experience higher happiness. Now, this Chetodarpan Marjanam happens by the help of chanting of the holy names of the Lord. Now, Srila Prabhupada, in this particular lecture in 1969, which was spoken on December 1st in London, is speaking about Chetodarpan Marjanam. I'll just read this. Sorry, I've just lost it. Actually, yeah. So you see there, it's mentioned Cheto Darpan Marjanam, Bhav Mahadavagni Nirvapanam, Shya Kairav Chandrika Vitranam, Vidyavad Jivanam. Let there be victory for chanting of the holy names, which can cleanse the mirror of the heart and stop the miseries of the blazing fire of material existence. See, this is what exactly a person who's seeking liberation is also seeking. He wants to stop the miseries. How Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is giving the solution? The chanting is the waxing moon that spread the white lotus of good fortune for all living entities. It is the life and soul of all education. Chanting of the holy name of Krishna expands the blissful ocean of transcendental life. It gives cooling effect to everyone, cooling effect, and enables one to taste the full nectar. Again, this is the happiness being described here, full nectar at every step. So uh, it says here, your life will be full of knowledge, transcendental bliss, blissful knowledge. Satya, Chinta, and Ananda. The three aspects are of the Lord. And this is what is one is going to achieve by chanting the holy names of the Lord. Vidya Vadjivanam Anandam Buddhivardhanam. And the transcendental bliss will increase. It says Ambudhi. Ambudhi means ocean. You see, as the ocean increases on the full moon night, similarly, when your knowledge will be like full moon, your anand will also increase. So these things will be achieved. Param Vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam. All glories to the chanting for a Krishna mantra. So please accept our request and try to chant and become happy. Now, if we go further down, Prabhupada mentions that this clearance is actually liberation, or Bhav Mahadavagni Nirvapana. What is liberation? To get rid of the miseries is liberation. But that's not the end. There's next part to it, which is what is the you dip yourself in the ocean of anand or nectar. That's where Prabhupada has mentioned that the devotional life starts, because nirvana is cessation of the material miseries. What's next? Do you just stay in that state of inactiveness and there's no material misery? That's not the ultimate goal or ultimate happiness. Ultimate happiness is when you start your spiritual activities. And what is the spiritual activities called? That's bhakti yoga, devotional service. Even Prabhupada has said there's karma yoga, which is nishkam karma yoga. That is also an anga of bhakti. So in the yoga ladder. And therefore, Prabhupada said that's called devotional service to the Lord. Then he's saying it is Krishna consciousness. So in such a state, when you are practicing Krishna consciousness, then you can become Anandamayo Abhyasat. One would become very transcendently happy in a situation. So like that, Prabhupada has explained step by step what is to be achieved by the yoga and how one can achieve Krishna consciousness, ultimate goal of the yoga. And there's a phrase here, Yam labdva chaparam labham manyate nadhikam tataha. Yasmin sthito na dukkhena guruna api vichaliyate. Prabhupada has quoted this verse in the context that if you achieve Krishna consciousness, then you don't need to achieve anything else. There's nothing more to be achieved because you'll become very, very happy. And in that context, Srila Prabhupada has mentioned the story of Prahlad Maharaj. He's saying that Guru Napi Vichliyate, that one would not be vichilayate. He will not become agitated by any sort of situation in the material life. He becomes very fixed up. He becomes very devoted, even in the situation that if he loses one of his own relative, still that will not deter his practice of Krishna consciousness. So in this context, Srila Prabhupada has mentioned the story of Prahlad Maharaj, where Prahlad Maharaj could not be deviated, even if his father was continuously tormenting him. So in this particular conversation, Prabhupada is mentioning here, if one is fixed up in Krishna consciousness, however heaviest calamity may come upon him, come upon one, he will remain steady without any disturbance. This is such a thing. And Krishna says, Kaunteya pratijanahi name bhakta pranashyati. That Krishna is, Arjun himself is the evidence of that. They were put in so much of trouble by their cousin brothers, but ultimately they became victorious. So this is one of the mentions here. Then at other places, Srila Prabhupada has mentioned about how Prahlad Maharaj has been an example of samadhi stage. Here it says, if one is situated in Krishna consciousness, even the terrible situation, fearful situation, he is not afraid. Just like Prahlad Maharaj. Prahlad Maharaj, only a 5-year-old boy. His father tortured him like anything. He was not afraid. This is Krishna consciousness. This is the stage of Krishna consciousness that Prabhupada is giving us. No fear. Abhay Charana Ravinda. Prahlad, whose strengths are so powerful that you do not care for me. When Hiranyakashipu said to Prahlad, Prahlad, with whose strength you are so powerful that you do not care for me, he replied, my dear father, by whose power you are you're talking like that, with the same power, I am having these powers, with the same personality. So it's a very, very nice, beautiful verse. With Prabhupada has used this verse in various contexts and various places. The time is really running out. I was wanting to talk about the
Prabhuji, Hare Krishna, can you please mute this person, SS? We can't hear you. Someone just joined. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Okay. Thank you. So, where was I? Yeah, time is running out. I was wanting to discuss, maybe I'll read very small paragraph here. The time is running out. That how the internal potency, the happiness that can be achieved by the personal company of Krishna, and that kind of happiness can never be imagined or thought about by the yogis who just want to merge into the Brahman, because they are bereft of this knowledge of Krishna's existence and how beautifully the pastimes goes on between Krishna and his devotees. So during the time of Rasa Leela, when Krishna has invited all the gopis to be with him, at some point in time, Krishna felt that some of the gopis, they were feeling very proud of the fact that Krishna is spending time with personally time with them. So to just shake their pride, Krishna kind of left their company and disappeared from the scene. At that time, the gopis, they started to become absolutely mad in absence of Krishna. And because of the intense love for Krishna, they started to talk to the trees and plants and to the deers, and they started asking the whereabouts of Krishna, and they started to talk to creepers, and they were thinking that all other living beings are so fortunate because Krishna has somehow touched them. They were saying that this earth must be so blessed and must have done so much of austerity that he got to get the touch of Krishna's lotus feet. After doing all of this, they become very fatigued. And when they became so fatigued, they they started to behave like a mad woman. Now you see, this is an example of intense samadhi. In this intense samadhi, the person or the devotee is only thinking about the object of their love, which is Krishna. And in that madness, because it is so intense, sometimes you can see that somebody's love, and that in material world also, you're only talking about that person all the time, or a thing or career objective, whatever it is, because they just love that thing so much, they only want to talk about it. Here we can see how Krishna, uh, how gopis are in so much of love with Krishna. And then what they started doing, they started to behave or talk like a mad woman. They could then only satisfy themselves by imitating the different pastimes of Krishna. This was an interesting part, that because they're imitating from this point to this point pastimes of Krishna, which means they were so involved and so intensely involved in each and every pastime of Krishna, that pastime is now manifesting from their own bodies and the words. And so from their mind, one of them imitated the demon Putna, and one of them imitated Krishna and shrugged her breast. One gopi imitated a hand-driven cart, and other gopi lay down beneath the cart and threw up her legs, touching the wheels of the cart, as Krishna did to kill demon Saktashura. One gopi imitated child Krishna and lay down on the ground, and another gopi became the demon Tranavrata and carried the small child Krishna by force into the sky. One of the gopis began to imitate Krishna while he was attempting to walk, ringing his ankle bells. Two gopis imitate Krishna and Balram, and many other imitate their cowherd boyfriends. One gopi assumed form of Bakasur and fell down as the demon Bakasur did when he was killed. Another gopi defeated Vatsasura. Just as Krishna used to call his cows by different names, gopis imitated him and calling the cows by their respective names. One of the gopis began to play on a flute. Other praised her the way Krishna's boyfriend praised him while he played his flute, and so on. Time is less, so I'm just stopping here. The point that I want to share is that these gopis, they are in the state of samadhi. And in such state of samadhi, they are constantly and intensely thinking about Krishna. And they're thinking about Krishna from his very past childhood pastimes, which means that they were present throughout the life of Krishna, and they were experiencing this intense love of Krishna from the day he was present. And they were observing and realizing and internalizing these pastimes and experiencing these pastimes as they were happening. Now, at some point in time, it's all coming back as a flashback, and they are imitating all those pastimes amongst each other. And because Krishna and his pastimes are not different, they are getting the relief of as if they are getting association of Krishna directly. So we can see this is the state of samadhi, or the goal of samadhi, wherein one can then, through his transcendental senses, so one is free from the material modes of nature, the rajas, the tamas, the sattva guna. One is free from all that. So there's no question of lust anymore. There's no lust. It's lust-free environment. Soul only knows how to sacrifice oneself to give pleasure to the other, which is called love. And in such situation and circumstances, one has achieved. So liberation is already achieved. Liberation is at the doorstep of the devotees. Bhukti Mukti. They're all like, they're standing there. But one is not interested in that. One is not interested in relief from the material miseries. One is only interested in giving pleasure to Krishna. So when one takes that, which is called Bhakti Yoga, devotional service, Krishna consciousness, everything else becomes useless for him, because everything else will be achieved as a byproduct. So Prabhupada has mentioned in the purport somewhere that one yogi who gets baffled or gets attracted by the byproduct, he will not reach to his goal. He's already lost his goal. So these byproducts, bhakti yoga, bhakti yogi is not, he is not, he does not want these byproducts. All he wants is the pleasure to Krishna, which is devotional service. By doing so, he'll attain samadhi. In that samadhi, he does not become inactive, he becomes very active, and he is drowning himself in the ocean of bliss, Ambudhi, as explained by Lord Chaitanya. And that ocean of bliss is translated into the beautiful pastimes between the devotees and Krishna in the spiritual world in different mallows or rasas, so to say. So I'll stop this explanation of this verse here. If there is comment, or is there somebody who wants to ask a question or share any realization, please do so. Hare Krishna.
Sorry, Hare Krishna Prabhuji. My
Again.
humble obeisances unto you. Very, very nice, wonderful class. I was just thinking just now, I thought that, Prabhupada mentions this, what's that called? Not, what is it? Impersonalists, yeah. Impersonalists and, voidism and merging into the Brahmajyoti. So much he mentions that because I think during Prabhupada or before Prabhupada, there were lots of impersonalists who went to the West and gave this knowledge, but then that was impersonal kind of merging into the, voidism, all the, there are so many impersonalists in India, all these big schools of thought. They transported this knowledge, and obviously the Western, because it was a new thing for them, so they adopted it. So all this, Osho and also so many things I hear. I think it is more lucrative for people of Kali Yuga, because then they are saying, you are God, I am God. That's why. And because in Krishna consciousness or Bhakti Yoga, it's das, anudas. So you are the servant of the servant of the servant of the servant of Krishna. So people don't want to become the servant and slave, because, Vrindavan Chandra Prabhu said that it's not even servant, it's slave. That's what das means. So you have to be like this. So people don't want to be slave, they want to be masters. So if they say you are God, I'm God, so that's like, yeah, I have the power, I'm God, you're God. So I think that's why it's more lucrative in Kali Yuga, the impersonalism, rather than becoming slave of the slave, like that. Das and das. That's what I thought.
Very rightly said, Mataji. So the ultimate freedom is expressed by becoming 100% dependent. And that is the principle of bhakti. When a child is 100% dependent upon the mother, that's where he's experiencing the joy without any anxieties. And the target or the goal to reach is Vaikuntha. In that Vaikuntha, there is no anxiety. Why? Because everything is taken care of. Because you're completely dependent on the Lord. The moment in the material world we become controller, to the degree we want to become controller, to that degree comes the anxiety and hence suffering. So impersonalists are unfortunately not wanting to identify or accept this philosophy, because Prabhupada has mentioned in this particular paragraph, also in this purport is mentioned, because their theory of monism will be defeated, and they want to stick to that theory of monism as Aham Brahmasmi, in the sense that I am myself God. So this is not just for modern days. As I understand, it is propagated by Shankaracharya himself, who is the incarnation of Lord Shankar or Lord Shiva. And there was a purpose for that incarnation, that Lord Buddha has taken away the faith of the people from Vedas, because they were using Vedas for killing animals and animal sacrifices. So by doing so, he stopped animal sacrifices, but he also defied the authority of the Vedas, and therefore people stop believing Vedas, hence they become atheists. Now, to bring them back to the understanding of God, it was not easy to say God is a person. Therefore, Shankara established the philosophy of impersonalism. And then the Vaishnavacharyas came along, and Sripad Ramanujacharya, etc., Madhavacharya, and they established the philosophy of Vaishnavism, that Lord is a person, he's Lord Vishnu, Lord Krishna, and like that, there's a devotee and there's relationships. And this is the whole progression that we understand from reports and commentaries of Srila Prabhupada. Therefore, Prabhupada is also called Shunyavadi. He has come to finish these Shunyavadis. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swamniti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaurvani Pracharine Nirvishesh Shunyavadi Paschatya Desa Tarine. So in his pranam mantra, we see that Srila Prabhupada is already declared somebody who has come to give this understanding of personalism to the entire world. So it's a nice point, Mataji.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Okay, I don't think there's any other question. It's already 54 past 8, so we'll leave with pranam mantra, Vaishnav mantra. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhuvaiva cha patitanam pavnebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. My obeisances to all the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna,
Prabhuji.
Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
Thank